Chairman, gentlemen of the committee, and fellow citizens. It is a great pleasure, even at the long distance separating the national capital from the nation's metropolis, to take part in the opening ceremony of the electrical exposition whose managers have paid me the high compliment of requesting me to say a few words of welcome. To say that I am delighted tonight is just as expressive as the greeting of my old-time friend, the blind preacher, who never in his life met me, but to express his delight at seeing me, when in fact he had never seen a living face in 20 years.
Mental issue now before our people can be stated. It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people to rule. I believe that the majority of the plain people of the United States will, day in and day out, make fewer mistakes in governing themselves than any smaller class or body of men, no matter what their training, will make in trying to govern. I believe again that the American people are as a whole capable of self-control and of learning by their mistakes. Our opponents, they lip loyal to this doctrine, but they show their real beliefs by the way in which they champion every device to make the nominal rule of the people a sham.
Country needs every ounce of its energy to restore itself. The costs of government are all assessed upon the people. This means that the farmer is doomed to provide a certain amount of money out of the sale of his produce, no matter how low the price, to pay his taxes. The manufacturer, the professional man, the clerk must do the same from their income.
My official duty at the present time to keep in touch with the most active Prime Minister has not only given me an undeserved reputation for activity, but the invaluable opportunity to see this great country of Scotland as it is, a country whose history is familiar to every American schoolboy, and whose traditions are a heritage to the world.
I'm going to make the same speech to you tonight that I make to the Senate of the United States. It always is pleasing. And when I know it will please the President of the United States and all the balance of it. That is to say, that we dismiss you tonight until 1939 at the same hour. I bid you good night.
We who in a formal or an informal way represent most of the free peoples of the world are met here tonight in the interest of the millions in all the nations who have freedom in their souls, to let those millions in the other countries know that here in the United States are 130 million men, women, and children who are in this war to the finish. Our American people are utterly resolved to go on until they can strike the relentless blows that will assure a complete victory.
What has already happened to Tokyo will happen to every Japanese city whose industries feed the Japanese war machine. If the Japanese insist on continuing resistance beyond the point of reason, their country will suffer the same destruction as Germany. Our blows will destroy their whole modern industrial plant and organization, which they have built up during the past century, and which they are now devoting to a hopeless cause. We have no desire or intention to destroy or enslave the Japanese people, but only surrender can prevent the kind of ruin which they have seen come to Germany as a result of continued useless resistance.
When I was a schoolboy, I had a desire to serve in public life. I had read the lives of Henry Clay and Gladstone and many other great men of our country and Great Britain especially, and other nations, and I had a desire to serve the public. Of course, it's always hazardous to start out to do that because the people can cut you off anytime they want to. There's no guarantee that you can make a lifetime profession of it.
I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
There is no constitutional issue here. The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
I don't want you to think we'll continue the campaign right away, but I just thought you ought to know you maybe ought to have a little rest. We intend to take some. We're not quite sure just what we're going to do with the next few days. We're going to stay out here in Minnesota. I haven't mowed the lawn for some time, and there still is a few things to do out at our place. As a matter of fact, I feel a great sense of both release and relief, and I hope and pray that all of you will feel the same way. I want you to be of good cheer. I'd like to have you feel a little happy. It's not easy, but quite frankly, this was an uphill fight all the way. I was the first one to know it.
While I'm fully aware that the plea of nolo contendere was the equivalent of a plea of guilty for the purpose of that negotiated proceeding in Baltimore, it does not represent a confession of any guilt whatever for any other purpose. I made the plea because it was the only way to quickly resolve the situation. In this technological age, image becomes dominant. Appearance supersedes reality. An appearance of wrongdoing, whether true or false, in fact, is damaging to any man. But more important, it is fatal to a man who must be ready at any moment to step into the presidency. If the American people.
Good evening. Last January 15th, I went before your senators and representatives in Congress with a comprehensive plan to make our country independent of foreign sources of energy by 1985. Such a program was long overdue. We have become increasingly at the mercy of others for the fuel on which our entire economy runs.
This is a shocking and terrible tragedy for the nation and the world. Mrs. Rockfall and I join with all New Yorkers and every American in extending heartfelt sympathy to Mrs. Kennedy and the President's family. May God grant strength and guidance to Lyndon Johnson as he assumes his grave responsibilities under these tragic circumstances. The prayers of all of us will be with him. I have proclaimed for the state of New York a 30-day period of mourning, and I have directed that all state offices shall be closed on the day of the President's funeral.
I believe that most Americans would agree on the problems that this country faces and which the next administration must solve. They include the need, once again, for an economy that works. The economy today is in very, very bad shape. The highest unemployment since the Great Depression.
And I'm the one who will not raise taxes. My opponent now says he'll raise them as a last resort or a third resort. But when a politician talks like that, you know that's one resort he'll be checking into. And my opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no, and they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips.
You don't always believe what you see on television. Let me tell you, the media have been wrong before. We have never subsidized any country or encouraged or any company to move from the United States to Latin America. You know full well the Caribbean Basin Initiative you've supported.
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time. I offered to meet with him as soon as possible so that we can start to heal the divisions of the campaign and the contest through which we've just passed. Almost a century and a half ago, Senator Stephen Douglas told Abraham Lincoln, who had just defeated him for the presidency, partisan feeling must yield to patriotism. I'm with you, Mr. President, and God bless you. Well, in that same spirit, I say to President-elect Bush that what remains of partisan rancor must now be put aside, and may God bless his stewardship of this country.
Well, trying to think how to respond carefully and cautiously here. I looked at the world the morning after 9/11, and what I saw was 16 acres of ashes in downtown New York City in the island of Manhattan. I saw a Pentagon that had suffered a severe blow. You could, if you looked closely enough on television, see footage of American citizens jumping out of windows on the upper stories of the Trade Center because it was better than being burned to death. And I knew for a fact that if we hadn't been successful, if the passengers on Flight 93 hadn't been successful, they probably would also have taken out either the White House or the Capitol building.
Folks, the people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we the people. We've won with the most votes ever cast on a presidential ticket in the history of the nation. 74 million. What I must admit has surprised me. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day.
I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know, who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day, that President Trump and I stand with you.
So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. And it is an alliance that is strong and enduring. And today, there were several demonstrations of just that point.